and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 252, and today's date is December 31st, 2013, and the title of this episode is a False Flag War and the Economic Collapse Coming in 2014? Before I get started, I just want to wish everyone a Happy New Year's. Be safe, be careful out there, and have fun. And I will not be doing a report on January 1st, which is New Year's Day, but I will continue on January 2nd going forward. Let's get into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand that the Eurozone is having troubles out there. We understand that they're in a recession/depression. We understand that there is high unemployment, high underemployment, and the people of those nations are having a very tough time. And in Italy, poverty is hitting record highs. A new report shows that poverty in Italy is at its highest level in the last 16 years as the country is struggling with economic crisis and high unemployment. And we see this not just in Italy. We see this in Spain, France, Portugal, Cyprus, Greece. We see it in many, many countries. In England, we see the people of England reaching into their savings, trying to make ends meet. We see the unemployment creeping up in Germany. So we see, and actually I did a report where Germans have not just one but two jobs trying to make ends meet at this time. In England, the Debenhams store has come out and now announced that they are slashing prices after issuing a profit warning following a poor Christmas sales, and it's the second largest department store, and their sales have plunged around 13%, and they lost about 30 million euros, and it's about 30 million euros lower than last year. And we can see this happening all over the place. It's not just in England, it's happening everywhere. If you have people who are unemployed, underemployed, how can you possibly have retail sales go up? It makes no sense whatsoever. And I saw on the People today, people were discussing, and if you don't know what it is a forum on the x22report.com site where people are discussing the economic collapse and other issues that are happening around the world. And I've done the same thing. I walked up and down my street, and I've seen the same thing. I used to see tons and tons of boxes and garbage and things from Christmas. This year, when I walked, and other people agree with this, I do not see the same thing. I don't see the boxes on the streets. I don't see the massive amount of trash bags. And even when I looked at mine was a very small Christmas footprint for my children. And I saw this going up and down the streets in my neighborhood. Now, right now, we see that gold was actually pushed down today. It has come back up. It was pushed below $1,200, and now it's back up to $1,200. But what I saw in the corporate media, they were out there saying that there is no reason to like gold right now. They're telling everyone to sell their gold. Do not buy gold. It's in a bear market. It's not doing well. Get rid of it. You don't need it. But guess what? Every time I hear the corporate media or any type of government official giving me advice what to do, I always do the opposite, because this is what I've learned. Whenever they tell you something, it's always the opposite. It just always turns out that way. They tell us that they're not spying on the people, and they said, no, we're not spying. Guess what? They're spying. They tell us that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. Guess what? They didn't. It is always the opposite. Ben Bernanke, we're not going to monetize the debt. Yeah, they monetized the debt. They don't see a recession coming in 2008. Yeah, there's a recession in 2008. It's always the opposite of what they are telling us. So they're telling us to sell our gold right now. Well, I guess Russia and China are not listening at all. They decided, hey, let's purchase. Let's purchase as much as we possibly can. And Russian banks buy 181.4 tons of gold in 2013. What did China do? Well, China bought 2,200 tons of gold for the year of 2013. And the figure actually totals the entire global mine supply for all of 2013 outside of China. China does not export any of its mined supply. And we can see what is happening right now. And the Federal Reserve, the central bankers, are going to are going to continually push the price of gold down because they want everyone out. We have to look back to when Goldman Sachs said, hey, you know what? We see that for precious metals that it's going to be a bear market. The next day, surprisingly, gold went down. So everyone sold their gold the day before. Gold dropped, and guess what? Goldman came in and bought all of that gold. They did the same thing during the housing crisis of 2007, 2008, where they were telling everyone that these subprime securities were a great investment, AAA rating, and they sold this out there knowing that it was all toxic. And how do we know they knew this? Well, they bet against all of this. And this is why we always do the opposite of what they are telling us to do. If they are telling us to sell our gold, it is time to purchase, just like Russia and China, because they realize this is the only way to secure your wealth. It's a insurance policy to make sure when this paper currency collapses, you have something, a backup, to make sure your wealth is there and completely safe. And this is why you need to purchase this. Does it mean you're going to go out and purchase tons and tons of gold? No. Take it slowly. I would speed it up at this point because you're coming in the late part of the game here. But if you can't afford gold, I would move to silver. And again, I have nothing to do with gold and silver. I do not sell it. I do not sell it to anyone. I buy it myself from different places, and I do the same thing as everyone else is doing it. I've been purchasing it for quite a while. I buy a little bit at a time. I usually split my purchases. I'll buy, a couple ounces of silver because it's very inexpensive. It's like $20 plus whatever the spot is. And then I buy, either a quarter, a half ounce of gold, or a full ounce of gold, depending where I am each month. And again, I am not a wealthy person. Just, I have to spread it out, but I always make sure that I pick up a little bit. If I can't buy gold this month, I buy silver because it's less expensive. But I'm trying to maintain and secure my wealth. I spend money on car insurance. I spend money on other type of insurances to make sure that I keep my wealth. Well, that money is just thrown out until you use it. At least with gold and silver, you still have it. You hold it in your hands. It doesn't disappear like other insurances. Now, HP just announced that they're going to lay off another 5,000 people. This brings the total up to 34,000 people this year. Now, I don't know about you, but all throughout this year, I've always reported of all the different layoffs, and they're in the thousands. And we even see the layoffs in the mortgage departments, which are in the thousands of people. And we can see that if this was truly a recovery and unemployment is coming down, and since unemployment is coming down, retail sales should be booming. People should be buying computers. Corporations should be stocking up, because I remember back in 99, 2000, 2001, when the economy was booming, I remember the companies that I work for, and I work for many different ones. They were buying computers hand over fist. I mean, it was just, they're replacing it every single year. Now we see companies not doing that. They're holding onto their equipment. They're not making the same purchases. Why? Because the economy is actually not doing as well as the Fed, the US government would like us to believe. Retail sales would be up, housing would be up, but it is all an illusion to make us believe that things are going well. And there was an article saying that the market crash is in the works, and what we can see in the weeks leading up to Christmas, retail analysis Sharper Talk advised the brick-and-mortar retail traffic was down over 20% this year. In-store retail sales decreased by 3.1% from the same week last year. Retail brick-and-mortar shopper traffic decreased by 21.2% compared to the same time period in 2012. And again, we have to use common sense. Back then, the unemployment was, 7.8%? Now it's 7%. Shouldn't it be better? And of course, people say, well, the reason is because everyone's going to the internet now. Well, that would be true, but the internet right now only had a rise of 3.9% this year. So it really makes no sense at this time. What does make sense is that the widespread job losses, that there are many, many people who are unemployed, who can't find work, that have fallen off the grid, and the government just doesn't count them anymore. Just like what happened in December 28th. 1.3 million fell off the radar. They're no longer getting unemployment benefits. They are now going to be counted as people who have given up. Doesn't mean they're employed. It means they're not counted anymore. People who are finding work now are receiving wage reductions. We're also seeing people having many different part-time jobs trying to make ends meet because they lost their full-time job that was making a nice income. They had to take part-time jobs with a less of an income, and they do not have disposable income to spend in the stores. And this is why we see retail sales down. The National Association of Realtors reported that the month of September saw its single largest drop in signed home sales in 40 months, and right now, this month, the mortgage applications collapsed a shocking 66%, which is a 13-year low. The big three automakers are down 8%, according to Bloomberg. And again, Ford, if you remember in the report that I did, also said they're going to cut their earnings because of what's happening in Europe and what's happening in the U.S. The economies are not doing well, and they're starting to realize this. Okay. Now, we understand that NSA is spying on all of us. And right now, the NSA is right in front of our eyes. They are building the foundation for a global police state. Now, it came out today that Dell is apologizing for any inconvenience by letting the NSA install spyware on all Dell computers. And I did a report yesterday where they said every time computers were shipped out, the NSA would intercept them, install spyware, repackage them, and send it off to the person who ordered the computer, and the person receiving it would have no idea that this has happened. Of course, Apple is denying that they ever work with NSA, but let me tell you, it's going to come out that every single device in the country has some type of spyware, a backdoor for NSA to spy on the people of the U.S. and government officials. And right now, this, as we can see, they are building the foundation for a global police state. The NSA system is the continuous gathering of all types of digital data on political leaders, economic institutions, and hundreds of millions of people around the world. And we have to think about this. As the chip power increases in every single device, even coffee makers, TVs, the NSA is going to be inserting spyware into every single one of these devices. This is why they actually built the Utah data center. This is why it is so big. This is why they have the ability to scale it out, which means expand it dramatically, because they understand that they will be able to get information from every single device. And they have already anticipated this. They already know they are doing this. They understand that they need to do this because they need to keep everyone. They need to keep an eye on everyone. They need to understand what you're doing, where your money's going, because the amount of debt that is owed to the central bankers is enormous. And they need to know where they can get your money. If you're a threat to their power, if you're going to try to overthrow the government or talks about overthrowing the government. And again, the central bankers want to make sure that they are secure in their place to keep you in this type of environment where they control you. And this is why the facial recognition scanners are being put up all over the place. The biometric scanners are being put up in the airport systems. This is why they're swabbing and taking your DNA, because they are creating DNA databases. They're using the facial recognition to create social profiles, and they're trying to track every single person where you are. And once now we see states are allowing and getting set up to have drones in the air, and this will make it much easier for them to keep an eye on every single person. Now, there is a report stating that Japan has enough plutonium to build about 1,000 nuclear bombs. And what they're saying is the real reason why Japan's Prime Minister Abe refuses to abandon nuclear power is because he wants to develop a nuclear weapon. And Tokyo is determined to develop a nuclear weapon. And right now, Japan is really not allowed to legally import weapons-grade plutonium. So what they're doing is they're extracting the plutonium it needs from the nuclear waste from the country's power plants. And U.S. analysis estimate that Japan currently has enough plutonium to build approximately about 1,000 nuclear bombs. And under its constitution, Japan is not allowed to own any weapon with offensive capabilities, including a nuclear bomb. However, as I reported before, Japanese politicians are trying to change their constitution. They're trying to get rid of Article 9, where they have the ability to have some type of offensive weapon where they can strike another nation. And we can see already Japan has passed a secrecy law where they do not need to tell people certain things, and the people of Japan are outraged right now. Now, Syria is going to miss their deadline, and right now, the Obama administration Monday called on Syria to honor promises to surrender its chemical weapons stockpile, a day after international experts acknowledged delays in removing some of the most lethal toxins from the country. U.S. officials conceded that a Tuesday deadline for ridding Syria of hundreds of tons of liquid poisons would not be met, and right now, the U.S. is, expecting Syria to meet their obligation, and because this is the next step in the process, and we can see what is happening at this point. They're building up the propaganda that Syria is not meeting their deadlines, and of course, in certain areas, the rebels are not allowing the shipments of the chemical weapons through. It's making it very difficult, and we can see how this is actually starting to play out at this time. Now, the U.S. forces in the Pacific are to counter threats, and this is a report. The United States is seeking to beef up its armed forces in the Pacific in order to counter threats in the region. And the Pentagon leaders are seeking to place the Air Force, Navy, and Marines in dominant roles to counter threats in the Asia-Pacific region, which they've deemed to be the nation's next big national security challenge. And of course, we all know that this is for the buildup of World War III. U.S. General Vincent Brooks, the new top Army commander in the Pacific, wants his forces to more quickly and effectively respond to small conflicts, isolated acts of aggression. He wants them to be ready. General Brooks is seeking authorization to send key elements of U.S.-based infantry brigade to Asia and keep them there for months at a time, moving every few weeks to different nations to conduct training exercises. Brooks said he wants a capable force that can respond to a variety of contingencies rapidly. He says, we can no longer afford to build combat units and put them on shelf to be used only in the event of war. The General's Command wrote in an internal planning document. He wants the troops there and ready. He wants to rotate them to different Pacific islands to be ready to go, because they understand what is coming, and that is World War III. This is the only reason why we're having this military buildup in the Pacific, because the yuan is a direct threat to the U.S. dollar. Now, I noticed in the corporate media that 2013 marked a comeback for al-Qaeda, and this goes on to say that the concern is that al-Qaeda networks of the future are being created in this jihadist melting pot, that there are multiple indications that al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula is plotting attacks both within Yemen and other Middle Eastern countries against U.S. and Western structures. They are also plotting against the U.S. within the United States itself. And al-Qaeda's future capabilities have been helped in part in part by a series of jailbreaks in 3 different countries, the most significant one taking place in July 21st in Iraq. A week later, prison riots and an outside attack freed more than 1,100 inmates from Benghazi, the prison there, while some 250 prison escapes during a jailbreak in Pakistan on July 30th. As for the implications for Americans, the leaders of both the House and the Senate intelligence panels maintained earlier this month that the country is not safe as it was a year ago. And this is what the corporate media is putting out there right now, because they are getting us ready for a false flag event. They're trying to make everyone believe that al-Qaeda is stronger, better, they're more advanced, they're breaking off into lone wolf groups, and they're just planting it in everyone's mind that something is about to happen. And of course, the Senate Intelligence Committee Chairwoman Dianne Feinstein, I think terror is up worldwide. The statistics indicate that the fatalities are way up. The numbers are way up. There are new bombs, very big bombs, trucks being reinforced for those bombs. There are more groups than ever. And House Intelligence Committee Chairman Mike Rogers said, "Oh, I absolutely agree that we're not safer today for the same reason." Now, it was just this Saturday, I reported that there were dry runs on the power grid, and the FBI is investigating, saying that this wasn't vandalism, this could have been a dry run. Well, now they're getting more reports that there are more dry runs happening, not just on the power grid, but there are dress rehearsals for future attacks happening on different public utilities like the water supply, on sewer systems, and many other power grid systems. And we have to remember that we have seen a lot of this lately, because of course, Janet Napolitano was out there saying that there's going to be some type of physical cyber attack on the power infrastructure. They've been having drills, practicing for this, and we can see that at this point they are, putting it out there that this is a possibility. And they are putting this out there saying that al-Qaeda is out there, the lone wolf groups are out there, people are being bussed in that are bomb makers, al-Qaeda is making a comeback, and we can see that they're continually building this up and building this up to make everyone believe. And even if you're not listening, you're kind of listening on the corporate media, and it's sinking into the back of your mind. So when the time comes for this false flag to happen, they can say, "Oh yeah, remember we warned you about this. Oh yeah, they're from Syria. Oh yeah, this is a terrorist group from Iran." And we can see that they have been building this up, and they have especially been building up the cyber attack propaganda for over 2.5 years now. Many government officials are out there saying that the power grid, the financial institutions are not safe, and they've been doing this over and over again. And we can see at this point that war, a false flag, will be coming sometime in 2014. Now, is it a possibility? I would say yes. Let's go back in history and see what has happened through time, and let's see what has happened at the start of 2001 when the World Trade Center came down. And let's see if we are headed towards war, a false flag, or economic collapse. Because everything put together should paint a picture for us of what is coming. Now, we have to remember that Donald Rumsfeld back in 2001 reported that $2.3 trillion was missing. This happened on September 10th, and then all of a sudden the World Trade Center was hit, and that was all pushed to the side, and of course it was hit in the offices that was investigating him. We also understand at the same time that Iraq was trading oil in other currencies and bypassing the US dollar. Because of what happened here, the United States central bankers really wanted to get the Afghan war and they wanted to get troops into Afghanistan. So, of course, where are the terrorists hanging out? They are hanging out in Afghanistan. And, of course, we know they wanted to use Afghanistan to grow poppies, to create opium. They wanted to take over the country because it is in a strategic location, and they understand they have many, many natural resources there, so they wanted to conquer that country. Because of all of this, they created the Patriot Act, which took away our freedoms. And this was the Patriot Act, which allowed the spying and the emergence of NSA to go forth and become this power that it is right now. Moving up to 2003, we had the blackout in the Northeast. This was in preparation for the Barrack grid going down. This was a dry run. They were getting ready for it to see if they were able to do it, and they were. The same time during this year, the Iraq war begins because they had weapons of mass destruction. The real reason is because Iraq started to sell their oil not using the US dollar. And as soon as the US invaded, it put the oil back on sale using the US dollar. And in 2005, we have Ben Bernanke out there saying there is no problem with the housing market. There is absolutely the subprime market is contained, and there is no problem. He does not see a recession in the future, and we're moving up to 2007, 2008, where he's letting us know the economy is just fine. But what have we learned? We have learned that the economy just fell apart. At the same time Bernanke was telling us this, General Wesley Clark was out there telling us that we are going to attack 7 countries in 5 years. And we move forward in time here into the crash of 2008. Bear Stearns collapsed in March. And then we had the stock market crash and the AIG crisis in September, where the banks and all these companies needed a bailout. And this is when Ben Bernanke came out and said the Fed was not going to monetize the debt whatsoever, and we are in 2008. And guess what? In 2009, Ben Bernanke monetized the debt and introduced us all to quantitative easing, where they pumped up the markets way, way up. Now, all of a sudden, we had many different mass shootings occur, and it started to ramp up in the year of 2009. And we are moving forward to 2010, where the U.S. now is invading Libya, moving into Lebanon, and we see that former Representative Gabby Gifford gets shot, and she starts the process of gun legislation. And of course, during this time, the NDAA was passed, and this during 2011, it was passed, and it was put into place, and this took away our due process, where the president had the ability to say, oh, I believe you are a terrorist, doesn't matter if you're domestic or foreign, I believe you are. He doesn't need proof. He can put you in jail for 1 year. Now, Standard & Poor's at this time in 2011 came out and said, we are dropping the United States from their AAA rating, and we're bringing them down to AA-. And that was showing that the economy of the United States was not doing well, even though the Fed was already at this point doing the second round of QE. At this time in 2012, all of a sudden, we had U.S. banks getting hit by waves of cyber attacks. It was all over the news, and cyber attacks were hitting Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and they started to ramp up the word cyber attack on financial institutions. And then we had the Korean Christian College shooting in April of 2012, and then also the Dark Knight Rises and Aurora shooting in July of 2012. CISPA was introduced in April of 2012 to lock down the internet for the central bankers and to take control of the internet, but that was rejected at this point. Now the economy is not doing as well as the Fed and the US government wants it to be doing. It's kind of doing worse than they thought, so they have to pump more money in. And this is when they introduced in September of 2012 QE3 forever, $45 billion a month to buy up toxic real estate and another $40 billion to buy Treasury bonds. And now we get the first report saying that the cyber attacks now are hitting U.S. infrastructures, power grids, and that is in the year of 2012. And in that same year, we have cyber attacks against Wells Fargo again, and U.S. suspects Iran was behind wave of cyber attacks against financial institutions. So we can see the story building right now. Then in December of 2012, we had the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting, and this is when the president said, okay, enough's enough. We have many, many mass shootings. We need gun legislation. At the same time that the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting was taking place, what did we have happen? Well, the FDIC, Bank of England, created a document for bail-ins, and this was in December of 2012. And the quantitative easing continued. They were not stopping it. It was going forward. Now, in January, the executive order 23 orders on gun safety was signed, with children standing behind the president, showing that we need some type of gun legislation and laws to take the weapons away from the American people. Germany, at the same time, asked for its gold back. So, as soon as they did that, the Fed said no. France said, we don't have any. Not in so many words. France decided to invade Mali, because Mali is the third largest producer of gold. January of 2013, cyber attacks continue on the financial institutions. It is all over the news. Now, the U.S. government in January of 2013 tried their first shot of creating a false flag on Syria, and they tried to plant that Assad launched chemical weapons on his own people and killed those people, and the president was out there saying, look, Syria did it, no one bought it. The American people kind of ignored the entire thing. We remember back when S&P lowered its credit rating, the Treasury Secretary, Geithner, the President were very angry, so in February of 2013, they decided to sue Standard & Poor's and stop them from rating the U.S. government. At the same time, in February of 2013, North Korea started to be provoked by the U.S. government, and we saw the propaganda out there that they have weapons of mass destruction. They're putting nuclear weapons on ballistic missiles. They'll be able to reach the United States, and the whole reason for this was that Iran was making a deal with North Korea to trade their oil, bypassing the U.S. dollar. Now, all of a sudden, because we've had all these cyber attacks in February of 2013, President Obama decided to create another executive order for cyber security. And at the same time, in February, CISPA was reintroduced. It is still pending in the Senate. Now, the president at this point said if he receives CISPA on his desk, he will veto it. Why did he create the executive order for cybersecurity? Well, the only reason you create an executive order is supposed to support a law, and there is no law to support it except if CISPA was passed. Now, we have to remember in February, the stock market is continually rising. Bernanke is out there saying there is absolutely no stock bubble happening whatsoever. If I remember correctly, he said this about the housing bubble. Now, we understand that the yuan, is making a play against the U.S. dollar. So in February, the U.S. decided to say the cyber attacks have been linked to the Chinese army, and this is where the cyber attacks are coming. And there was a wave of cyber attacks in the month of February. And they're saying that critical infrastructure now are the target of most attacks, and most of them are coming from China. Now, at the same time, the sequester was coming up in March of 2013, and the president was out there saying, this is going to be terrible. We can't let this happen. These are going to be cuts, and if these automatic cuts come into play, people are going to be, things are going to disappear, and they let the automatic cuts take place. And what really happened? Nothing at all. In March of 2013, a weaponized drone to kill an American. Rand Paul gets up there, writes a letter to Eric Holder, and of course Eric Holder said that basically what Rand Paul was saying, does the president have the authority to use a weaponized drone to kill an American not engage in combat on American soil? The answer to that question is no. And what Eric Holder is actually saying is if a American was a combatant, they would be allowed to use a drone on American soil. And we can see that this was a mixed message here, and what he was really saying is we will use drones if there are people threatening the government. Now, DHS at the same time in March, they purchased armored vehicles. They retrofitted about 2,717 of these vehicles. In the same month, they purchased 1.6 billion rounds of ammo, drying up ammo all throughout the country, and it was very difficult to find ammo in this time period. Same time in March, Mexico now wants to physically audit their gold at the Bank of England, and basically the Bank of England said, no, you cannot do this. And in April, DHS it comes out that DHS does not need a warrant to search safety deposit boxes in banks. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security has told banks in writing it may inspect safe deposit boxes without warrants and seize any gold, silver, guns, or other valuables it finds inside of those boxes. Now, we have to remember back in December, the FDIC Bank of England created a document for bail-ins, and all of a sudden, in Cyprus in March, Cyprus banks close and freeze everyone's account. They tell them that they're only going to take 8 to 10% of their account. They actually ended up taking 47% of their money, and they told them that capital controls will be only in effect for about 2 weeks. They are still in effect, and they're saying come January or February, they might ease those capital controls. We'll have to see what happens. Now, in April, we've had Boston bombing, the false flag event, to say that this was, I believe, at this time, this was actually going to be used for the passing of the gun bill. They were trying to blame it on radicalized gun owners, and because of the people there having camera phones, taking pictures, it was all over the alternative media that the story didn't make sense, and they couldn't go with that, and the gun bill was being voted on at the same exact time, and that was basically voted down, but the president asked for the gun bill to stay pending in the U.S. Senate. In the same time, in April, gold was pushed down $200 out of the clear blue, and it was dropped down to $1,300 in that range. At the same time in April, Obama quietly passed a law making insider trading easier for U.S. politicians. And then all of a sudden, in May, what happened was Obamagate. There was one scandal after another. There was a Benghazi, IRS, a frontal assault on the First Amendment, and during this time in May, we see the defense support of civilian law enforcement agencies being put in an update which now allows the military to unilaterally declare martial law without presidential approval. And at the same time, the NSA surveillance in June was exposed. Snowden came out and said they are spying on all Americans. In June, we also see that Fed has been changing and manipulating numbers. The Fed comes out and says it needs only about 80,000 new jobs per month instead of the old 150,000 jobs. We see another mass shooting in the Santa Monica College, and that is leading up to the next trying to get the gun bills passed, because right now the CISPA gun bill, the UN Arms Treaty, is pending in the Senate. And in June, the White House says Syria crosses red line with use of chemical weapons on its people. The Egypt President Mohamed Morsi is ousted from the military, and the U.S. cuts aid to the country, and Egypt starts making deals with Russia to purchase military equipment and begin aid coming into their country. The same time in June, this is when Goldman Sachs came out and said they're going bearish on gold, and gold was slammed down again to $1,219. Now, in August, something was being prepared because we had the terrorist threat where they had to close all the embassies and everything around the area and lock everything down. Risk of attack was high, and here they were planning the false flag event on Syria. At the same time that this was happening, the president decided to pass the executive order. This is the Assignment of National Security and Emergency Preparedness Communications Functions. The president signs the executive order to take control of all communications during an emergency situation. These include phone, wireless, and internet. In August, they put up a travel advisory for all U.S. citizens because of all the terrorists that are running around. We also see another shooting at Georgia Elementary School leading up to the next mass shooting gun confiscation, which they're trying to pass. Now, we see right now that Syria in August crossed the red line, and they used chemical weapons. General Dempsey was out there saying the Syrian conflict is not military decisive. It would cost billions of dollars, and it's not going to turn out the way the central bankers think it's going to turn out. This will go into a major war with Russia and China backing Syria. And then at the same time in August, we see some glitches in the NASDAQ start to occur. We saw one in August. We saw one in September. The president was in a corner. They didn't know what to do. The American people were not for the Syrian war. They knew it was fake. They knew it was a false flag. Congress, he left it up to Congress to take it off his shoulders. Congress was completely against going to war in Syria at this time, and all of a sudden a back door opened, which allowed the president to say, listen, if Assad gets rid of their chemical weapons, we are fine with that. Putin picked this up, and of course that was leaked, and they wanted him to pick it up. This way they had the ability to say, we have an out, and we do not have to proceed with the Syrian war, and that's why that happened. And then all of a sudden, another mass shooting in September happened, and this happened at the Navy Yard. And this was the Navy Yard shooting, because this is leading up to the next false flag to get the gun bill passed. In September, at the same time, we can see that Kenya right now is becoming the clearinghouse for China for the yuan. At the same time in September, about 3 or 4 days later, the Kenya Mall attack happened, and all of a sudden the U.S. troops need to go to Kenya to help secure the country because China is there. At the same time in September, Kerry signs the UN Arms Treaty, and the Senate has not passed it, but the President says he will pass the UN Arms Treaty, which they're saying will override the Second Amendment, which it cannot. There was, at the same time as September, another NASDAQ glitch, and we can see many, many different glitches occurring all at the same time. Again, another attack on Adobe, and this was 10 times worse than originally thought. It stole people's personal information, credit card information, and whatnot, and it was huge. Israel flies into Syria, and they bomb the Syria where they believed the missiles that were purchased from Russia were being held, and Israel decided just to go in and strike another country, which is really an act of war. Then we had another mass shooting, and it was a TSA agent in LAX. And then in November, we had another New Jersey Mouse Mall shooting, and this was another build up to what is coming. They're trying to build their case again to disarm the American people. The United States House just passed a bill called H.R. 992, and the Swaps Regulatory Improvement Act, written by the banks. The bill would allow banks to move their derivatives and put them into secure, guaranteed FDIC accounts because they understand the collapse is coming and they need to do this. Moving forward, we understand that China already said that they are no longer purchasing treasury bonds. We also understand they do not see the benefit of holding U.S. dollars. We see China making a swap deal with England. We see China using the yuan as the petro yuan to sell their oil. China is now pumping billions of dollars into Africa's infrastructure because of all the natural resources there, and then all of a sudden we see France, the central bankers, move into Central Africa. We see them moving into Sudan, and we can see that there is a race to capture all the natural resources down in Africa before World War. And now we see in the last couple of months a huge pivot to Asia, and we see the president making a deal with Iran, and Russia is out there saying you do not need the missile shield anymore if you're talking peace with Iran, because that's why you had the missile shield in Europe, and the White House came out and said we are keeping the missile shield there. And what else are we seeing? We see that the NSA has been spying on every single American with every single device. They completely lied about it, and more information is continually coming out, and we see the police state lockdown. They've implemented the Real ID national license ID system, where they'll be able to set up checkpoints in every single area. Your information will also be traded along to Canada and Mexico. Nothing is private anymore. We see in Japan they are building a new base there, bringing in more sophisticated weapons. They put missiles in Guam. We see that Russia now is setting up their missile shield system. There is a race to Antarctica to capture those natural resources and to set up bases for war. And we can see now what is coming toward us, a complete breakdown of the economy. The Fed is out there saying that the economy is doing better. Stock market is hitting all-time new highs. We see that the Fed is going to taper in January. Now, Congress is implementing new sanctions against Iran, and we have to remember what the president said. If we do not talk about peace here and we can't do it diplomatically, you leave me with one choice, and if you impose sanctions, it will be a military strike on Iran. Before the Sochi Olympics, Saudi Arabia, Israel made threats to Russia, saying that terrorists are infiltrating Russia, and all of a sudden we've seen 2 terrorist attacks in Russia, and the Russian president knows exactly what this is, and it seems like they are making it seem like there are terrorists every single place. The United States said, we'll help you protect and secure the Olympics if you can't do it, trying to weaken the state of Russia. And we see all of this coming together right now, and we can see what is absolutely happening. We have reports of a nuclear weapon that went missing. I skipped that one, sorry about that. It went missing. There was paperwork, and from the report from Dave Hodges, it's about 3 to 5 different nukes are definitely missing. The military has been shaved down. They've been relieving high-ranking generals from the nuclear areas. They've exploded a nuclear weapon off the coast of South Carolina to send a message to Obama, and we can see where this is all headed. Everything that we talked about is the United States, to sum it up, is losing control in the Middle East. They are preparing for war in the Pacific against China. They have been provoking China. China has set up the no-fly zone area. South Korea has set up a no-fly zone area which overlaps China. And there was an incident in the Pacific Ocean with military ships. Cyber attacks, they're saying, are coming from China. All of this is a buildup. If we put all of this together, we can see a false flag event coming to get us to war, to cover up the economic collapse. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.